Hello everyone, my name's Callum, and recently I played in a planetary qualifier for Star Wars Unlimited, and my leader slash deck of choice was the Mandalorian Sworn to the Creed. So with Mando, when you play an upgrade, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, exhaust an enemy unit with 4 less remaining HP, and he also deploys on 6 resources at a full 7. And then when he comes out on 6 resources, uh, he has the ability of when you play an upgrade, you may exhaust an enemy unit with 6 or less remaining HP. So that's the leader of my choice for the PQ at Cardiff this weekend. And then my base to go along with Mando was Data Vault. So with Data Vault, it is a 33 HP base, and then with your minimum deck size increased by 10 cards. So it was a 60 card deck with a 10 card sideboard. So it was 70 cards in total. And so the idea of this deck is that we can see that there are a lot of low cost units along with ground and space. So our high cost unit in the deck itself is at 5 cost, and that's the Mandalorian along with Han Solo and Chewbacca. And then our other high cost is the Traitorous. So ideally, we need the game plan to end on 5 or 6 resources. The reason we need to for this to happen is because Mando deploys on 6, and with the things like Hotshot Blaster, Snapshot Reflexes, Surprise Strike, that's a lot of damage that you're going to get on your opponent's base to the point where they won't know what's hit them. And ideally, as you can see at the sideboard, we've got Plo Koon, Enfys Nest, Han Solo, and a Ewing deployment. So that also indicates that we either need to end the game before 7 resources, or the game should be ending between 7 and 6 resources. If it goes to 8, it's not a problem because there is a chance that the game could end at that point as well. So, as I've said, in terms of the deck itself, there's a lot of low cost units with the highest being 5. So the idea of this deck is you want to go high and wide with the board, or you can make your minion really huge. So for example, we have R2D2 Battlefield Marine, L3 Luke, and another R2D2 as a turn 1 play. As a turn 1 play, this is 3, 6, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 15 total turn 1 plays in the whole deck. I personally think that this is enough turn 1 plays in the deck in order for it to operate because, it's a 60 card deck. You're gonna draw 6, so it's quite a high probability that you're gonna draw a turn 1 play. Um, so in terms of turn 1 play, priority wise, we could probably look at either a Battlefield Marine, which comes out as a 3/3, or an L3 as a 2/2 that is shielded. Then I would go for R2D2 Full of Solutions because R2D2 Full of Solutions has a really good card ability, which I will go into later. And then another good option for turn 1 then is Luke Skywalker. Okay, so that's our turn 1 plays covered. And then, for example, so turn 2 onwards, okay? So for turn 2 onwards, we have a lot of different options that we could play. So for example, we have a blue leader with ambush, and when played, can play an extra 2 resources to deploy onto the ground. So that means they could ambush in space, then move over to the ground for 2 cost. Or you could just move onto the ground for 5 resources and ambush into a ground unit. Then we have what is probably one of the best cards in the deck and probably one of the most expensive, the Set 1 Falcon. 3 cost, 3/4, and it comes in ready. So this ability is really huge, and there can be a nice combo that you can pull off with it, which is something that I will cover. Um, and so the next card in the deck would be another Falcon. So in terms of the event, I managed to pull this Falcon off maybe once or twice. Since the event, I have revisited this card and probably would look to take the card out at this point because I do find it's a little bit slow. But during the event, it was fine. It did its job. But I just think we could maybe use that 2 spot extra for something else. And then for turn 3, we also have a resupply and a waylay. These can come in really handy um, for various situations. And then Mandalorian's rifle as well. Um, then in terms of spaceships wise, we have the Bright Hope and the Razor Crest. So the Bright Hope is really good against any aggro space sort of deck because you can just slow them down, and if you, for example, if you got a Battlefield Marine on low health, you can return that to hand and draw a card. With the Razor Crest at 4 resources, I do find this was a bit slow. I never actually managed to play the Razor Crest in the whole event, so it has made me rethink, along with set 3 Falcon, of whether it's worth main decking or whether it's worth taking out for other cards. Okay. And then, of course, that's going to be followed up by the Darksaber, one of my favorite cards in the deck. It's a really nice looking card as well. Okay, then we move on to the pilot side of things. So in terms of piloting, we have Luke, Chewbacca, and Han Solo, and then the Mandalorian pilot. So these are all really good pilots in their own way, which I will delve into further. And then for me, one of the S tier cards in the whole deck then would be Traitorous. Because with Traitorous, you can steal an enemy unit at 5 resources. Um, but with Traitorous, the unit has to cost 3 or less. Sorry. So with Traitorous, this is really good into sort of any aggro deck where you can just steal a 3 cost or below unit and it comes on your side. And then it makes the opponent have the difficult choice of, do I want to kill my own unit or do I want to leave my unit survive? I actually managed to win a game by stealing someone's unit that was a 1/4, and I managed to hotshot blaster with my opponent's unit into their base to win the game for me. So, and one thing I forgot to mention with Traitorous as well is that you get to tack down units as well because it's an upgrade, which is a really nice tactic to do with Mando. In terms of favorite cards in the deck, I would have to go for Hotshot, um, Mandalorian's Rifle. There's a fun play that I managed to pull off that I'm excited to show you. Hotshot, Mandalorian's Rifle, set 1 Falcon, of course, Darksaber, Traitorous, Chewbacca, Han Solo. To be honest, I just love the whole deck. Snapshot Reflexes at 1 cost for a card as well. So this is the deck as a whole. And then in the sideboard we have 3 Bamboozles, 2 Plo Koons, 2 Edifice Nest, 2 Han Solo, and 1 U-Wing. So the Bamboozles are there for just in case we verse any pilot decks, for example like a Poe Dameron, or maybe you might verse like a Cad Bane who plays Hotshot. So we have the Bamboozles there to sideboard in if they go upgrade heavy. Plo Koon is just a really good card at 5 cost. It has coordinate, it has ambush first and then coordinate raid 3 at a 3/6, which is a really good stat line for what it is. With this deck, you may find it hard to get the coordinate off, but the ambush is good value for what it's worth because more often than not, Plo Koon will live. So in terms of going to 7 resources, if you feel like round 1 went that long, this is when you would either bring in Enfys Nest or Han Solo, or maybe both. So Enfys Nest is a card that is 5/7, Saboteur, and when played on attack will return an enemy unit to hand equal to Enfys's power or less. And then we follow up that with Han Solo, Reluctant Hero, 6/6 ambush, deals combat damage before the defender. So if you kill a unit with Hand's Ambush, Hand takes no damage back. And then of course we have U-Wing Reinforcement just to bring in case the game goes that long and we need more units to flood the board. Just all really good options. Okay. So here's my deck on Star Wars Unlimited database. So when this video goes live, I will be posting the deck link for anyone that's interested and who wants to view the deck themselves. It's all here in all its glory, and I will share the link for you guys to check it out. Okay, so as mentioned before, we were speaking about the Mandalorian leader. Okay, so Mandalorian leader on the leader side, his action is when you play an upgrade, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, exhaust an enemy unit with 4 less remaining HP. So where this can be good, so this can be really good into any sort of aggro or it does sort of maybe even sort of control decks as well. Okay, so for example, if they've got a piercing on board and you've got a battlefield marine on board, you can snapshot reflexes into their base, and then you can tap down piercing as well, providing he's got 4 less remaining HP. In terms of aggro side of things, so with Cad Bane, so I versed 2 Cad Banes on the weekend, and with Cad Banes there's a lot of like Crafty Smuggler, Bazine, low cost units that are below 4 HP. And then I also versed the Vader Yellow as well, so which was also trying to swarm the board with a lot of different tokens and low cost units. So my plan was play as many upgrades as I can to tap down those units, and it did work. With the upgrades, it's just all about in sort of what order you do it in and when it's correct to play an upgrade. Okay, so that's what I found with Mando's action. It's all about when trying to get that upgrade off. Okay, so let's look at his flip side now. Okay, so the really cool thing with Mando is that he's a 4/7, comes out in 6 resources, and his ability is when you play an upgrade, you may exhaust an enemy unit with 6 or less remaining HP. So the really cool thing with Mando's ability is that he can also tap down leaders as well as big units. All they have to do is have 6 or less remaining HP, and you just need to play an upgrade. And of course, we are running an upgrade heavy deck. So that's a really fun ability. The way I look at it is kind of like a nerfed version of Django, is how I look at it. Less oppressive, and you got to be a little bit more smarter about when you want to ping that off. But yeah, over the weekend I managed to tap down a Vader, Mole, um, leader flips. I managed to tap them all down just because I managed to play an upgrade and get them down to low HP into that range of exhaust. Okay, so now we're just going to take a look at some of my favorite cards in the deck. So first of all, we got R2D2 full of solutions. So with R2D2, he's a turn 2. He's a turn 1 play at 2 cost, and he's a 2/4. So the really good thing with R2 is that his when played ability is you may discard a card from your hand. If you do, search the top 3 cards of your deck for a card and draw it. So where this was really good for me on the weekend was I played this unit, and in my hand I had 2 pilots and 2 pilots and an event in my hand that I didn't want to play. So I played R2. I discarded one of my pilot cards. One of them was Luke. And from Luke, I looked at the top 3 cards in my deck, and I ended up drawing a Hotshot Blaster. And then with that Hotshot Blaster drawn, I knew that I had instant aggro for the next round, providing R2 survives. So at this point in the game, it was 24 HP on my base and 27 HP on my opponent's base. So my opponent attacked with a unit, only dealing 2 damage. I then claimed, and then before I even drew 2 cards, I knew I had a Hot Shot Blaster in hand, so when I drew my two cards, Hot Shot Blaster was straight into the resource, and then he was smuggled out to win me the game. I only got that Hot Shot Blaster through R2's when played ability of discarding a card and hoping to get something that will benefit me on either this turn or the next turn. So please don't overlook R2's ability. It's really good and come in very clutch in those tight games where you sort of need to filter your deck for certain cards that you may need in certain situations. Okay, on to one of my most favorite cards in the deck. This is probably one of the best cards in the deck because it's a one cost +1/+1, but when you play this upgrade, you can attack with the unit straight away, okay? So, for example, you've got a Battlefield Marine board, you pay the 1 for Snapshot Reflexes, the Battlefield Marine has swung into base for 4, and while you've played this upgrade, you've also tapped down a unit with Mando's ability as well. So, so turn 2, Battlefield Marine board, pay the 1 for Snapshot Reflexes, and boom, you shut down their turn 1 play already without even doing anything, and you've swung into their base for 4 instead of 3, which can really help in the long run, as I found every inch of damage does add up when you go long. Okay. Undoubtedly, one of the best cards in Star Wars Unlimited is Hot Shot Blaster. Any red yellow deck needs to run Hot Shot Blaster as probably a 2 or 3 of, most likely 3 of, just because it is a very good card. It's not broken because it costs 3 resources, but it's a very good card in terms of that. It's a free resource. As soon as you draw it, straight into resource pile, either this round or the next round. You know you're going to play it as soon as possible because you want to play this card when you have units on board. And once again, like Snapshot Reflexes, it's got instant board impact. So when you smuggle this card out, boom, you attack with your unit into their base straight away. Nothing your opponent can do about it, and then you also get to tap down the unit. Uh, if Mando's on leader side, it's going to be 4 less remaining HP, or if he's on the board, then he can tap down a unit that is 6 HP, which would likely kill your unit off the board. And with that unit being tapped down, your opponent's already at a disadvantage, as well as you swinging with an extra +2 to base. So, yeah, it's a really good card, and I really recommend this as a 2 of or 3 of at most, because it's just worth it at +2 permanently, and once again, it's a free resource. It's all about making your decisions really easier for yourself when in these moments. Okay, onto a card that I really love in this deck, and it can also come in very clutch in those moments as well. So, 5 cost Traitorous. When this upgrade becomes attached to a non-leader unit that costs 3 or less, take control of that unit. So when you play this upgrade as well, not only do you take control of one of your opponent's units that cost 3 or less, but you can also tap down another unit as well. So for example, if your opponent has a 3/3 and a 1/4 on board, you can steal a 3/3 and then you can tap down the 1/4 as well. It's a really good card in the deck. I would love to run this as a 3 of, but I do think 2 is just right for game 1 material, because game 2 you might find your opponent may sideboard against this sort of card, because once it happens, it's like, okay, what can your opponent do? For example, in one of my games at the PQ, I was playing Vader Yellow. I stole his Victor Leader, and I had control of Victor Leader for 3 to 4 rounds. My opponent did not want to kill his own unit off the board, because that would mean he would be trading his own units into it when he could be going into my base. And through me stealing Victor Leader, it actually also stopped my opponent from gaining the +1/+1 for each space unit on board, which really helped my situation in the game. So yeah, Traitorous is an awesome card in this deck when paired with Mando's ability. And then undoubtedly one of the best upgrades in the game in my opinion is the Darksaber. +4, +3. Okay, within the deck, the Mandalorian is the only Mandalorian unit in the deck, so why do we use it? We use this card because it's a +4, +3. There was one game I had where I had a Darksaber on the Mandalorian. I then hot shotted Mandalorian into the base for 10. Then the following round, then I followed that up with a surprise strike into my opponent's base. So over 2 rounds, my Mandalorian leader swung into my opponent's base for like 22, 23 damage alone just off the leader, just because my opponent didn't have anything to deal with it. And obviously, once again, with the Darksaber attached to Mando, you tap down a unit at 6 or less remaining HP. And then the following round, you Hotshot Blaster with Mando in the base, so Mando's already done the damage. It doesn't matter if he dies now because he's done his job of dealing enough damage to base that he can. But yeah, it's a really nice looking card too. So, one of my favorite, and I know I keep saying this, but another one of my favorite cards in the deck was the Mandalorian's Rifle. So, with this card, when played, if attached unit is the Mandalorian, he captures an exhausted enemy non-leader unit. There is a really fun play I had off with this card. I won't speak about it now. I'll speak about this at the end because I think it's that good and it's quite funny because me and my opponent were just sitting there just looking at the board and just went, that really works. Because we have to read the card like 2 to 3 times just to make sure. Yeah, that works. So yeah, so please stay till the end to watch to see what happened with the rifle. Okay, and then my another card. So a card that's in here that completely threw off my opponents was resupply. So for example, the deck ends at five resources. So what do we resupply to? We are resupplying to our Mando flip. So, for example, there was 2 rounds on the weekend where I managed to play resupply turn 2, and on the next turn after resupplying, I managed to play set 1 Falcon at 3 cost, and then I also played a Han Solo pilot into the Falcon so you can swing into base for 5, and my opponent was just sitting there and be like, what can I do against that? Because we're only on 4 resources, and he's just sitting there with like a ground unit on the board and be like, okay, cool. The Falcon's got a pilot on him now. There's nothing much I can do. So, and then the other thing with resupply as well, it just gets us to our Mando flip a turn earlier. So, for example, I was versing a Piet Colossus, played a resupply. On Piet's flip, I had Mando out a turn earlier. He already was upgraded with like a Darksaber and a Hotshot Blaster. And then we went to game 2. Once again, I managed to resupply again. He flipped. And then he played a very big cost unit. And then I managed to Mandalorian's Rifle and then win the game. But as once again, I will be speaking about this at the end. Okay. So in terms of honorable mentions for the deck, so R2D2 Pilot, it's a 0 cost pilot. It's a really good card for the deck. Okay, really good because it's an upgrade, and it's free. It's almost free if you play as piloting. Chewbacca can't be removed unless it's no glory only results or overwhelming barrage, which will more than likely get targeted. And then what else do we have here? So blue leader, as I've been over this, 3 cost, 3 ambush, or 5 cost, 5 ambush. Then we have surprise strike, +3 instant attack. I probably won the game with this card pretty much all the time just because it's the +3 in the base. And then waylay. So Waylay has come in really clutch for myself because it allowed me to return units to hand that were either getting bigger or that were really big. So, for example, going back to my Pierre game, he played a CR90 relief runner, and then I attacked with my Falcon. I was ready, and then he piloted the CR90 relief runner with Iden Versio, and then that was a perfect opportunity for a waylay because I managed to not only remove his big spaceship with restore, but I also managed to discard his pilot as well. Okay, so for example, I'm gonna just touch on a few pointers with the deck now in terms of piloting. So with the deck, piloting is what you should be looked to be doing with this deck because pilots count as an upgrade, but it's not the be all end all of the deck. So with pilots, you can run into the problem of action economy. So, for example, you pilot the unit and it gets tapped down, but you can also tap down the unit in that process. So, with pilots, you sort of just need to sort of assess the board state and assess your opponent's resources. If you could do a couple of actions before you pilot to make sure your opponent can't react to it, that is probably the best play. Or the other bet, or maybe the actual best play would be if you have the initiative and you have a Han Solo pilot open, straight away pilot Han Solo onto a ship and he attacks straight away. So, for example, to provide you with another example, I had a blue leader that was ready at 3/3 in space. I played a Han Solo pilot on it. It was swinging for 5. My opponent couldn't deal with this blue leader and Han Solo piloting it for 3 to 4 rounds. It never left the board until the game finished. Just from that early play of piloting, the blue leader was just swinging in for 5 each turn, and my opponent had no answer to it. And there lies the piloting pros essentially is that once a space unit has been piloted, not only is it swinging for a big amount of damage, but it's also got high health as well, so it's a big body on board. Um, okay, so what to consider during rounds? So with this deck, as mentioned before, the deck needs to be easily played. So for example, there's a lot of smuggle cards in here, so Hotshot, L3, Jetpack, those are all smuggle cards that that are free resources. In terms of round priority, I would look to be playing Snapshot 100% of the time. If you have Snapshot in hand, it should be the first thing you play, if there's a unit on board, of course, because Snapshot can attach to space units as well as ground. So, for example, with Blue Leader and the Han Solo pilot on it, I managed to Snapshot with Blue Leader in the base for a total 6 damage. And then just continuously doing that and tapping down units, it didn't feel very nice for my opponent. Yeah, so that's the sort of deck tech essentially. I'm happy to answer any questions on it. Um, so just to go quite briefly, Paladin's really good mechanic for Mando because he gets those upgrade and leader ability pinged off. And then to follow on from that, there are upgrades in the deck that can not only be attached to vehicles, but can be attached to ground units and vehicles as well, such as Snapshot. Okay, so in terms of the sideboard, so when do we look to sideboard in certain cards? So for example, over the weekend I versed Cat Green, which I lost, Vader Red, no sorry, Vader Green, which I won, Han 2 Blue, which I won, um, Vader Yellow, which I won, Piet Colossus, which I won, and then Cad Red, which stopped me from going 5-1, is what I lost to. So out of all the games, I probably sideboarded in Plo Koon the most because, as said, I want the game to be over by the 5 or 6 resources turn, essentially the Mando flip. and I found that Plo Koon did help because he was ambushed into the lower cost unit and stayed alive too. I didn't get the coordinate off as much as I would like, but for my game plan that was fine because as long as he's sort of sticking on the board, that means I can still upgrade him for the next round. So with Mando, you just need to be upgrade heavy and just make sure the upgrades are being played when and where possible. Um, it, with the Piet blue, because of things like Power of the Dark Side and certain removal cards, you need to go high and wide. So, for example, of course, you can play upgrades, but obviously just be aware to play multiple units to protect certain units from removal. So, for example, you can play like a 2 cost, and a 3 cost, and a 4 cost, which is really good. Um, Another tactic you could consider with resupply as well. So, for example, turn 2 resupply. Turn 3, then you could play a Millennium Falcon into a Han Solo pilot at turn 3, when really turn 3 you should only be playing a Falcon. So that's another good thing with resupply, is that it speeds up your aggro game plan to get the game done and dusted sooner rather than later. Um, okay, and then finally, I'm going to move on to what was my play of the day, and which me and my opponent found very funny, was a Mandalorian's rifle. Was a Mandalorian's rifle being played onto the Mandalorian leader unit to capture my opponent's exhausted Avenger. So with the Mandalorian's rifle, when played, if attached unit is the Mandalorian, he captures an exhausted enemy non-leader unit. So when the rifle is played, you can exhaust a unit, and then you can capture another. Then you can capture an exhausted unit. So with the Mando's rifle, you get a 2-for-1 play at 3 cost. So for example, we got to 7 resources, and my opponent, as you see, my opponent's got Piet out. He's currently exhausted. And on this turn, he decided to play an Avenger, which I had a Mandalorian and R2D2 on board. As soon as the Avenger was played, I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna play the rifle and I'm gonna capture the Avenger. And my opponent was like, what? No way. So we both was just sitting there reading the card for like 2 minutes, just like, okay, yeah, Mando can capture the Avenger, or as I like to say it, the Avengers under new management, that being the Mandalorian. Um, so this has been my first ever YouTube video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If there's any questions on the Mandalorian deck, please feel free to reach out. And yeah, as I said, the link will be posted in the description. Any questions, reach out, and yeah, I'll be looking to update the deck and hopefully provide another video with my updates soon. Bye bye. Thank you.